Now recognizes Ms. Kuster for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chairwoman DeGette, for hosting this important hearing today. The recent rise in gas prices has once again made it abundantly clear that our nation's dependence on oil is unsustainable, both in the short term and in the long term. The American people are reminded of this each and every time they fill up at the pump. In New Hampshire, Granite Staters are paying even more than the national average of $4.23 per gallon. And yet, while consumers are being pinched at the pump, oil companies have been raking in profits and pushing for policies that will only make our country more dependent upon oil. It's long past time we promote long-term American energy independence through investments in clean and renewable energy production to insulate our economy and our consumers from these short-term crises. This gas price roller coaster might be great for your company's bottom lines, but it's hurting the American people's pocketbooks. To the 6 oil companies before us today, you made more than $75 billion combined in profits just last year. And it looks as though with your first quarter, you're on path for record profits again. Now, to address your comments earlier, we understand you did lose money during the pandemic. Most Americans did. Everyone had a tough 2020, including businesses and the 60,000 workers that the oil industry laid off last year. But the facts are that oil majors testifying here today still returned billions of dollars to your shareholders in 2020 at the same time that you were laying off your workforce. So please don't use 2020 as an excuse for gouging the American people today. In fact, other than in 2020, all 4 of the oil majors testifying today made billions of dollars every year between 2017 and 2021. So one bad year does not excuse the practice of ripping off American consumers. Now, I'd like to focus in on the 4 oil majors testifying today to identify how much money your company spent in 2021 on stock buybacks and dividends, and how much your companies plan to spend during this year of record profits on the clean energy investments that several of you mentioned during your testimony. And just the numbers will do, you know that our time is short. Mr. Woods, how much money did Exxon spend on stock buybacks and dividends in 2021? And how much do you plan to spend on 2022 on low carbon technologies?
We did not buy back any stock in 2021. Our dividends were roughly $15 billion. Half of our stock are owned by average American families. It was an important income stream for them in the depths of the pandemic and during the recovery.
So would you be surprised that the public record shows $14.9 billion in stock buybacks and dividends? Would that number surprise you?
That is the $15 billion of dividends that I mentioned.
I thought you just told me you did not spend any.
On buybacks. We had no buybacks. We had $15 billion in dividends.
$15 billion in dividends. And how much on low carbon investments?
We're ramping up our low carbon solutions business and have a commitment of $15 billion through 2025 to invest.
And how much last year when you were paying the $15 billion in dividends?
I think it's important to recognize the dividends that we pay are critical income to people, and during this difficult economic times,
I'm just trying to compare. I understand that, but $15 billion in stock dividends and $2.5 billion in low carbon investments. Does that sound about right?
That sounds about right. We recognize we are growing our low carbon.
The same question for you on Chevron. How much in stock buybacks or dividends, and how much in low carbon investments?
Congressman, in 2021, we paid out roughly $10 billion in dividends. We bought back around $1.4 billion in stock. And this year, we expect to spend between $4 and $5 billion on low carbon energy.
Thank you, Mr. Worth. Mr. Lawler, how much did you spend in stock buybacks and dividends, and how much in low carbon investments?
Yes, Congresswoman, we spent about $4.5 billion in dividends and about $4.1 billion on buybacks. We spent several $billion on low carbon energy, ramping to $3 to $4 billion by 2025. and
Okay,
then we'll
Ms.
be at 5
Watkins at
billion.
Shell, my time is almost
2030.
up. How much in stock buybacks and dividends, and how much in low-carbon investments?
In 2021, we spent about 6.3 billion on dividends and about 2.8 billion on share buybacks. And on our renewable energy, we spent about 2 to 3 billion last year, and even more on low carbon fuels and investments in low carbon fuels.
Okay, my time is up, and I
I
yield
thank the
back.
gentlelady. Mr. Burgess, you're now recognized for 5 minutes.
I